Hello, everyone. Very good afternoon. And a very warm welcome to all of you to this, the first edition of Technovation, where we will be talking about technology and innovation. The rapid development of data, analytics, and technology in the fintech ecosystem is transforming the future of finance and is creating new opportunities and therefore new challenges for businesses in the financial sector. Aiding this is an innovation that could be transformative and financially empowering last mile and ushering in an era of financial inclusion in this country. With the ever-changing landscape, it is crucial to understand the emerging technologies impacting financial services. And in response to this need, we at PayNearby have put together this discussion to understand the emerging trends underpinning this sector. With this panel discussion, we bring industry stalwarts as they unravel the facts and key insights that will propel the industry by leaps and bounds in the coming years. This National Technology Day, we at PayNearby invite you to be part of a panel discussion where we will be talking about how data, analytics, and advanced technology are creating a culture of innovation in driving financial inclusion. Very warm welcome to our esteemed panel members, Yashoraj Tyagi, who's CTO and Chief Business Officer at CASHe, and N Sathish, Chief Product Officer at Zaggle. Very warm welcome to your panelists. I would now request our esteemed panelists to give a brief introduction about themselves as we set the ball rolling.
Great. Thanks Vivek, Shiva, and the AdFactor team for giving me this opportunity to be part of this great conversation. I think there are some nice set of people, and I don't want to miss this opportunity, though I got this notice on a very like yesterday. But so my name is Satish. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Zaggle. I've been fortunate to be working in software products from very early in my career, from banking and financial services, and been launched products out of India to the global market successfully in my previous two organization, which was Citi, which became iFlex Oracle, where we built FlexCube, and then Suntec, where we built a relationship-based pricing product, which is almost used by 80 of the top 100 banks globally. And more recently, I just shifted into Zaggle about 4 months ago, and I've been working on helping the organization, which is already set pretty well on the spend management part of it, to go to the next level of things in the business spend area. So I'm working on these initiatives, on looking at various aspects across the industry and what the regulation and everything is doing about. I'm quite interested to have this conversation and hear different perspective from Yash and yourself, Vivek, and hoping to go back a little more wiser after this conversation.
Thanks. Thanks, first of all, for having me here, and thanks a lot to Vivek and Siva for hosting this. And very glad to be here. It's always good to be in the company of like-minded people and discuss about sort of transformative ideas and exchange notes on what's shaping up fintech currently. For me personally, I've been at CASHe for slightly over 5 years now. So I have seen sort of the 0 to 1 and the 1 to 10 and now the 10 to 100 journey that we are on right now. And it's very surprising that on a day-to-day basis you don't realize, but on a longer time horizon you understand that how much things have changed. Like when I started working at CASHe, there was nothing called UPI back then, and you can see that that just gives you kind of an idea of the scale of change that happens while we are in our current roles in our respective organizations. So it always helps to exchange notes on what is coming up, what is it that are the latest trends, latest behavioral changes that are looking that we can observe in our respective customer segments, and seeing that what we can do to build around that. And personally, I've been associated with heading data science at CASHe previously. Took over as CTO in 2020, then December last year took on the additional role of heading both technology and business at CASHe. It's been a very exciting and sort of a personally challenging role, which is why I've loved whatever we've been doing here, and very happy to exchange notes with all of you here.
I'd like to start with you, Yash, if I call you that. Technology and business, Chief Technology Officer and Chief Business Officer. How does that work?
So I've been asked that question quite a few times, and I feel that it is almost natural for it to be the way it is right now. Because in the sort of organizations we are, and these are not disjoint roles. Even if I may look at the more conventional sort of role that a typical business guy would do in a typical company, that would be somewhat related to things which you would typically call business development, right? And I think that it like for organizations like ours, this conventional mindset of business development has to fundamentally change, because it is technology-led business development at the end of the day. When you're trying to create synergetic partnerships, trying to forge new partnerships of the kind that have not existed before, or create new products in collaboration with sort of existing entities, I think it requires a fundamental level of first principles, technology, the rethinking and developing of products that probably didn't exist before. It's not really about I've created XYZ, now you go and sell it. That's not what it is about anymore. It's about seeing that how you can come together and create products and solutions that really benefit both the entities and more so the customer base that would be served. And that's why I think for technology and business to come together, it's extremely crucial. Because for a good value add to come out of it. So that's why I think that it is the need of the hour, and I think that I do see more organizations following suit, or at least I see a lot of organizations having people on the business domain who are actually coming or have a well-versed technology background as well.
Coming to you, Satish, in your opinion, what role does data analytics and data in general play in the field of financial inclusion?
See, Vivek, what's becoming imperative right now is that how do you take data into every aspect of what you're trying to solve? And at least having worked on products for many years, so some of the bigger flip that I see in the way in which we approach building products, personally, which I'm very fascinated about, or I keep pushing it downwards into everyone I work with, is when you start building a process, trying to solve a problem, start looking at what data sets are required. Then the traditional way of trying to build the UI UX or the and then build the logic and then go for the data model to make sure the the software works. For that it's more of required looked at as a need rather than how you design it. So in my perspective, currently it's about, so if I'm going to look at whatever problem, let's say it's in financial inclusion, for example, I need to know, if I'm talking about financial inclusion, I need to see what are the data set that could be what are the household income what are the different kinds of assets they hold, and the asset they hold could be very different, like a farm equipment to cattle and agricultural land. So how do you start building those data sets becomes more imperative, and from that part, what are the problems you're trying to solve becomes much easier. So today, every problem you're trying to solve from a product aspect, first start looking at what data that is required for that particular element. And that approach has made a big difference. And particularly for financial inclusion, I think this is an area or any new area that you get in where there is no enough data points for you to know or do some secondary research about it, which is very required for any user research to be done before you launch certain things. It's very important that you start building this data with whatever capability you launch into that segment, so that you start collating information, feed into, so that you can start building offerings and solution which bases those data. So financial inclusion, fundamentally, the problem is today we don't know, while we have some information about some 330 odd million customers have or underbanked or unbanked have opened their accounts, and about 40-50% are kind of dormant in certain scenarios, the data that we get to see. But what are the kind of financial transaction are these people into, right? And why do they need to do those transactions? How big is their community or reach in this ecosystem where they transact? And who are those people with whom they transact, and what methods and modes of transaction do they do? What are the kind of products or exchange that are happening? These are all information that are really required. I just said a small set of sample, and the more information we get on this, we get a better visibility and better way to solve these problems is what I believe.
And in some sense, just following up on what you just said, the amount of data that financial institutions, fintechs like us have is borderline scary. There's so much data, but in more ways than one, there is very little we derive out of that data today. There is so much more that can be derived, so much of data that is in some sense untapped. So in your view, what are the use cases or applications that we are still yet to tap on the data that we have, which we all agree is plenty more than what we are using right now?
Right. So Vivek, I think in terms of data that we hold or financial institutions hold today, I would say probably these are the bank community who have been banking for many years. So particularly on the financial inclusion part, I still feel we don't have enough information or data about this demographics that we're trying to solve. So that was the point I was trying to make on my previous one. But for the bank or the current customers who are active with any kinds of business, right, there is huge amount of data. You're absolutely right. And those data have started spiking in the last few years. Thanks to the internet and digital and mobile economy, they've kind of skyrocketed like crazy, and the storage cost has gone down tremendously in the last few years. So there is enough and more data. The bigger problem there, as you rightly pointed out, is how do I take meaningful insights out of it and start solving the problem? So the one way in which I look at it from where we have enough data is that when you start storing those information, particularly, can I break those data into short-term, medium-term, long-term, right? And then if I can start breaking them in short-term, medium-term, and long-term, then data which I use for short-term solutioning, which needs to be closer to the touch point of a customer or the end user for whom I'm solving the problem, those needs to be kept closer to that area. And then the ability for you to take those information to process and service those customers becomes easier. The medium term are information that you need to access very periodically, not regularly. And then the long-term data are something that you need probably once a month or once a quarter. That becomes a very important element in the way you design it. And that again starts with how you start processing your big data. Of course, people have been moving from data warehouse to data lake, and they're basically pushing the data further away. But still trying to solve the problem, they're going to try and find ways of storing these information in a meaningful manner to be consumed and leveraged for their business or for their customers or end user. So that's more for people who have enough data today on the banking or the bank segment, so to speak, in the fintech space that we're talking about. But for financial inclusion, I still feel there is a lot of work to be done in terms of collating this information. Of course, with telco and other means, MNOs and others playing a part, today we have enough information. And thanks to the India stack with Aadhaar and eKYC being kind of promoted, and with UPI and other digital payments coming in, there is further amount of information that is slowly opening up for us in this space for sure.
And Yash, on the same token, right, plenty of data at terrifying levels also poses a data security threat. So there is a lot of data, there is a lot of insights that we can glean from them. We're barely scratching the surface right now, but along with it comes this threat as well, because there's so much of SPI, PII, and other financial data that is sitting in our systems. So could you briefly touch upon what are certain things that we need to be worried about where data is power, but at the same time is also a threat.
So thanks for the question, Vivek. And I'll as you said, I'll add on to what you just mentioned and what Satish was just mentioning about in terms of how the kind of level of data that is being accessed simply is extremely scary by multiple orders of magnitude. And I think it ultimately boils down to having a good, healthy, and very robust data access, privacy, and infosec policy, which unfortunately is an afterthought for most organizations in the quest for doing your own 0 to 1 journeys and building out products and doing those releases. Security, privacy, and sort of this entire infosec piece for a lot of organizations takes a backseat, even though they would not openly speak about that. And it kind of becomes very retrospective in nature, that when you do have incidences happening, then you oh, I need to work on this, I need to do something, or I put patches in place so it doesn't happen again. So it should not be like that. I've in a lot of these forums that I've been a part of, I've always kind of stressed on the fact that infosec should be a part of your product strategy by itself, because then you don't have to kind of build it out as a last leg of your product journey. It is there as part of whatever you do. And in kind of data centric organizations like ours, that is even more so important. So if I had to still speak about what organizations should do, when it comes to PII, collect as less PII as possible. For doing all the modeling that people need to do, you need not actually collect a lot of PII for people to do that. Even abstract information that about anything that people do, whether it be buying, spending habits, all of that, that is not really PII, and that can still be used to do very effective degree of modeling. And so as far as PII is concerned, store it separately. Do not make sure that the access rights to it is extremely prohibitive. As high layers of sort of infosec policies apply to that as much as possible. And as far as data access is concerned, people can access other data which is non-PII, but at the same time, it should be important that people in general are not accessing data that can be used to identify the customer. They can extract traits on the customer, they can extract abstract information on the customer, but need not be able to identify who the customer actually associated with that information is. So even your data science team or your ML team, which is journeying models on the entire customer base, need not exactly need to know who the customer is. That's not at all required, right? So having completely different sort of storage policies, retrieval policies around PI is extremely crucial. And thirdly, and very importantly, data access by members of the organization should be strictly on a very need to know basis, right? It needs to be identified that who needs to know what, and they should be only given access to only that much. Right? They need not even know even one more thing over and above that, because unfortunately, most of today's data leakages, attacks kind of happen because of internal attack vectors, right? Systems have become very stable and robust and secure that it is difficult for an average guy to sort of gain access, but internal attack vectors are still very, very common, and that is what needs to be controlled. And that can be controlled only when you have a strictly highly tracking based need to know policy on a data, especially in a scenario where everybody is doing a work from home sort of a thing. So these are my sort of 2 cents on this question.
Perfect. And as you rightly said, I think statistics say that it's about 85% of breaches are inside jobs.
Yes.
The number may be more today.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Yes.
And the other interesting thing that you said, and I always like to quote this when we have security discussions internally, is when people come and say, oh, we have to fix this because this is an audit finding, right? So security should not be for the sake of audit, but yes, audit should reaffirm your security measures in place. So on just building on that, we are sitting on a lot of data. We are trying to glean as much information as possible. But reality is that we've been doing so for at least a decade now, right? So in your opinion, Yash, what are certain needle movers for organizations like ours to go from descriptive to predictive to prescriptive faster? Is there any innovation gap which is inhibiting us from becoming more efficient, more accurate with our data analytics that we do.
Sure. Correct. No, so see, there are a bunch of things in that, and again, like a very, very important question right there. So, firstly, when you talk about prescriptive analytics, and if you look at the BFSI sector in general, right, like, everybody's got like, data science teams, data analytics teams. Every banks has like these so-called center for excellences where they kind of, do a heavy amount of data modeling. But then, when you look at organizations who actually use machine learning in production for making their most crucial data decisions, you'd be probably able to count those such organizations on your fingertips, right? There is always human in the loop involved, even when you're sitting on, sort of data, probably like which covers 10% of India's population. But still, you would not rely on that, and you still put humans in the loop to act as a maker checker, which right there, while I agree, like that is important to a certain level, but unless it's a chicken and egg problem, right? Like unless you don't kind of do it to the fullest extent, you would not know what can go wrong, right? And that's a problem right there. While I do completely agree that the first rule of doing machine learning in production is to know when to not do it, that you should have that big red button over there to know that, okay, this is not going as per plan, and you to stop it. Like, but you need to, but all of that comes with a machine learning and production policy that, okay, this is what we're going to try doing. So like today for us, we use ML in production to do credit scoring and doing underwriting and disbursals in production. But the reason it's worked out for us, because the longest time we tried it and we kind of worked around it, almost took us 3 years to kind of curate it and get something out in production that actually works. And now we have to rely, like that is all that everybody uses. So, so that becomes very, very important. Secondly, I think that, I think that we had organizations which capture a lot of data, but do not use it to personalize user experiences are simply doing a gross, grave injustice to their customers, right? Because if your customer is coming and sharing that, like that this amount of data, we need not talk about customer segments anymore. We need to talk about a segment of one, that can you deliver the experience that one particular customer needs. And I think that this is probably like, even though that might seem like something that we've been discussing for the last 4 to 5 years, but I don't think that organizations largely have been able to sort of, move needle a lot over there, in the fact that, like, borrowing for what Jeff Bezos says, that everybody's Amazon app should be different. Exactly like that, like simply because he has so much data about users spending and buying behavior, that why can't organizations in BFSI, who also know so much about customers' buying and spending habits, curate and offer highly personalized experiences to all of their customers using the data they're collecting, which is also, I think that on a secondary level is something that really needs to come up, as over time. And I do think that there's certain organizations working toward it, and we're going to see a lot more of it, but this is largely what has not happened so far.
There's a notorious joke that says that people who do machine learning use Python, and people who do artificial intelligence use PowerPoint.
Yeah.
As right? So,
and when you actually enter doing machine learning, you use Excel, so
correct. So, Satish, what are your thoughts? How can we do this faster? Are we doing it fast enough? Should we, what are certain things in your mind we should do to accelerate this?
Yeah, so I think there has been a lot of effort is going on in the whole ecosystem to kind of solve certain things. But what's been really interesting to note of late is that the number of new players who have come into, particularly in the fintech space and the startup ecosystem, to kind of solve those specific simpler use cases, right? But the unit economics of doing it to have a sustainable business model is where the challenge is, right? So that's where most of them fizzle out, because there are enough and more problems in the scenarios that the needs a solution for. And so particularly on the topic on data and financial inclusion, like, Yash really pointed out those aspects that are actually there. Like the segment of one is very popular even in the current banked or any kind of business that you do where you have active customer base, and how do you kind of drive more primary customer who could buy more than one product from you, is where they are trying to solve the segment of one, which was originally done for large corporates and enterprise. Now it's for every retail customer. You have to give that experience, otherwise they're not going to stick with you. Particularly on a financial inclusion context, the problem is slightly more complicated because even from the recent data that I've seen from TRI, there are only 17 out of every 100 who have proper access to internet, right? So, and which means which kinds of limits them to going completely digital on many transactions that they do today. While most of them are shifting to smartphone and other aspects, data is fairly cheap. The reaches have gone down pretty much to a lot of smaller smaller villages. It's still the use case applicability of that is becoming a bigger challenge, right, in true sense. And that's where organizations have been trying to solve it, to find out, because the use case today, they still prefer transaction on cash in many areas, and easy access to cash, be it like the cash in cash out, which was a very good use case that kind of came up, or the problems that you're solving with from PayNearby, where you're trying to activate every store in the country to become a potential financial unit, because like we have about over 600,000 villages, and probably the postal network, which is one of the largest in the world, has probably covered about 1/4 of that. So I think our biggest challenge right now is to work on this infrastructure, which is something that's very actively being taken up. The second part is, once that is done, what are the use cases? For those use cases, I think we need to start looking at different kinds of product design from a financial standpoint, whether conventional savings will work, so conventional credit will work, or conventional investment will work in these markets, is something you need to start the product managers in the financial space should start looking at these problems very differently, because I would want to give a credit to a person in a rural economy where the payment schedule has to be based on, if he's a farmer, based on the crop cycle, right? Because that's when he's going to make money, or he or she's going to make money, and that's when I want them to make payments. So can your loan system do that today, right? Can your lending system do that today? Or can I design a product which will be linked to the cycle, and can it also pick up the weather data and say, this time I'm giving you a waiver on your spread, which I would have otherwise applied because you had lesser rain from what we have picked up. Like those are data, like for example, John Deere as a company, they went from a farm equipment company to a data company, primarily because they started putting a lot of sensors in all the farm equipment and started giving more value to farmers, right? So how do we bring those kind of elements for these demographics and segment that we're trying to address in these markets, whatever be their profession or whatever be their way of livelihood? We need to understand that and start infusing data to give value to them. And I feel infrastructure, the way in which you define products, which consumes data, you need not ask for the data from them, you consume data, because typically they're used to looking at demographic data, transaction data, behavior data, take social data, take other data like the weather or the soil information, for example, in this case, and then start, as a tech player, you consume these information and then show value to them. And then when the crop cycles are better, you try and redeem those where you had waived off earlier, and they would be more than willing to work with you on those elements. And I think that's where I think using data to the power of innovating to solving a last mile problem will make a big difference for people in fintech for financial inclusion.
Absolutely, Satish. That's bang on. And you mentioned India Stack. I think my personal belief is that we're all fortunate to be in this country at this time, where the regulators and in many ways the government is keeping the startups on their toes, right? With the India Stack and all of those things. Especially the India Stack is something that is very, very close to my heart. I believe that that's creating the rails for people like us to innovate, which pretty much means that people like us need to innovate and figure out distribution. The infrastructure and the guardrails that are required for that have already been laid out for us to use. So as closing comments, starting with you, Yash, how do you how do you see this play out? What does the road ahead look uh, from a data analytics and financial inclusion perspective as closing comments, starting with you, Yash, and then Satish next.
So, I'll actually build on what you just mentioned, actually, Vivek, because what I'd say is that number one, that I do agree that the internet penetration in India might slightly be still low in spite of all the noise we see around, but it's still one of the fastest growing in terms of smartphone penetration. It's still one of the fastest growing in terms of internet penetration. And it is one of the fastest growing in terms of sort of people having access to bank accounts as well, because of things like a Jan Dhan scheme and stuff like that. All these three combined create a very strong proposition for players to ride on top of this and then offer financial services at the grassroots level. And there is already a large number of players coming out who want to kind of do micro investments for at a tier 3 rural level. There are people who want to do micro bite-size insurance at that level, right? And then there are obviously people who are doing credit at that level as well. Now it is now becoming a question, as you rightly mentioned, of being able to crack distribution at scale at that level, because the underlying infra has been set up, right? How do you crack distribution? How do you give a user experience to the masses becomes extremely important. And I was just talking the other day to a founder who very rightly mentioned it's cracking distribution at that segment is completely different from cracking distribution any other scale. Like, if you have an app over there and if you create an image of a shopping cart to relate to shopping, it might not work because those people have never seen a shopping cart in their lives before, right? So the level of problems that exist out there require a completely different level of thinking. And I think that there'll be great organizations that will be built on this, with who have been able to create a user first, product driven distribution at scale over there. And secondly, purely from a data perspective, right? Like, while I do think there is also a lot of very right kind of the noise that has been created around putting the relevant kind of guardrails around data access, privacy, security. I think we're also moving to a very consent-based sort of a system, that while you have the relevant consents in place, where the user knows that what is it that they are agreeing to give for what purpose, you can access data with, and I think that from in that regard, the regulator in India has been very forward-thinking and very progressive as well. So all of these things combined, I do see that there is going to be a lot happening in this space over the next 4 to 5 years, and I think millions of Indians are going to come into the fold of the financial, formal financial economy by virtue of this, all of this happening.
Brilliant. Satish, your thoughts? What is the road ahead?
I think in true sense, echoing on what Yash said, while I did call out the digital infrastructure, the speed at which we need to kind of enhance it, we still have in the 17 out of 100 is still a huge market size to be solving the problem for. So I'm not discounting that at all. Right. At the same time, as you rightly called out, the India stack is being built towards addressing it. And of the financial inclusion data chart, if you look at it, India ranks among the top in terms of the number of accounts, the direct benefit transfers, the usage of those, in terms of having access to it. And of course, there are many players who are getting into bring all these micro products, which is where your product design capability are going to be kind of challenged for these markets. And from a distribution standpoint, which is definitely going to be a challenge in terms of how you design it, this market is always used to a human touch, right? So how do you enable those small level of human touch? And if you really break the rural economy or the unbanked or underbanked segment, these are, if you can start solving them by like a community, right? These are small microcosm of or micro ecosystem which exchanges, right? So a dairy farmer would have a delivery person who's among the same village who has a bunch of fleet of vehicles, who would then the payment actually happens between these two, and he ships it externally. He might consume fuel or something from another person within the same community. So actually the cash moves around it. So how do you then start picking up use case where the journeys are touching multiple people for a specific business that they're trying to do, or there's a specific commodity that they're trying to make or sell, right? So if we start taking those journeys and start solving them within that ecosystem where the touch points are, where different personas connect together to solve a particular problem, I think I feel the speed at which we could solve this could be faster, because you're essentially making sure everybody in the value chain has got to adopt to it to make it seamless and easy for them, and that becomes very powerful. So there are enough and more such scenarios to be looked at, and then how do you champion more kind of a business correspondent, kind of a local person, and with aspects of vernacular and reaching out, and the ability to talk in your native language. You don't even have to type in, you just talk to your device, and using vernacular, using voice conversation, you could actually start initiating transactions. So there are enough and more options available to solve this, which are those high impact, high velocity, easy to solve problems, is where we need to start picking up and solving it, and the opportunity is humongous for us to go out and make an impact into this community, which can make a huge difference for us as a nation. And this is not only in India. The financial inclusion problem is across the world, and whatever you build and solve here at scale could go global to many of the markets that we are aware of.
Absolutely. We just saw UPI go live in Nepal as well. I see, this is something that I constantly think about, and we are speaking in 2022 about financial inclusion when there is already a certain level of financial inclusion. The uphill task is for us to increase it further penetrate more and more, right? One thought that always, I shudder at the thought that if COVID had, God forbid, hit us in 2008, right? When India Stack did not exist, Aadhaar did not exist, Jandan accounts did not exist, right? Imagine the amount of difficulty that the direct benefit transfers that are happening today, the amount of difficulty, the amount of just sheer chaos that would have been there. And I don't remember the last time I went to an ATM, for example, to withdraw paper money. So it's just amazing. It's sort of serendipitous that we are sitting here in 2022 worried about further financial inclusion and penetration, but take for granted the India Stack and the other guardrails that are forward-looking regulators have put together. That's just fantastic. With that, I think we are at the end of the allocated time that we have. So thank you, Yash, and thanks, Satish, for your time. Satish, I know you said you wanted to leave Wiser. I think I am leaving Wiser, so I'll take that from you. Thank you so much for your time. It was just fantastic and wonderful talking to the both of you. Very, very pertinent and exceptional insights. Thank you so much.